the Village of I would like to call the Village of Lansing Planning Board meeting of Monday, January 10, 2022 to order at 7:05 p.m. So first item on our agenda are some approval of minutes. We will not be doing December 13 this evening, but November 8 and November 30, we would like to move those along for final approval if everyone feels comfortable. Has everyone had a chance to look them over? And if there are no objections, may I have a motion to accept the minutes of November 8 of 2021?
So moved.
Tony,
Second.
by Mike, second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
It is passed. Next ones are November 30 of 2021.
I move that we approve the minutes of November 30, 2021.
Mike, two. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Tony. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Passed. Okay, moving along to the public comment period. I don't know if there's anyone with us tonight who would like to bring something up to the attention of the planning board that is not on the agenda this evening. If so, if you would let us know that you would like to speak. Not hearing or seeing that anyone seems to want to speak, I would entertain a motion to close the public comment period.
I move that we close the public comment period.
Mike
I'll
Baker,
second.
James McCauley, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Moving along to our agenda item, continue the public hearing for the final plat of cluster subdivision proposal 2021-4464 by Beer Properties LLC. Beer Properties and Hunt Engineers are providing a final plat of a cluster subdivision for property parcel number 45.2-1-47.2, which consists of approximately 40 acres of vacant land located between Craft Road and Bush Lane. Final plat, along with details of proposed duplex lots, will be reviewed by the planning board. So I think last time with the planning board, Monica and Tony had made some requests for some additional information. One being some of the alternate plans that had been considered and discussed. And also, I think Tony, I forget now exactly what it was you'd asked for. Oh, one of the reasons why
Yes.
the character would be compromised, I believe, if the current plan was not adhered to. So I was wondering, David Beer, whether you could comment on that, or do you have some of those plans for us this evening?
Yeah, hi. If that's where you want to start, Chris Wood has some drawings that we've worked on and I've kind of scribbled on to highlight the differences between the different versions that you know, are being considered.
That were considered, okay. Chris.
And if you'd like to do that, it may take Chris a minute to load things up, but if he could have the screen, I think he can manipulate those drawings.
So Mike, you'll give Chris the screen.
Yeah, he's already got it.
Okay.
David, there's the preliminary plat plan that you had drawn on. If there's something else you want to see up, let me know and I'll change it.
Can you rotate?
Please rotate that.
Yeah, could you rotate that for us, Chris?
Absolutely, Ken.
Oh, that's much better. Thank you. Okay, so what are we looking at here now, David? Here. David, you're on mute?
Sorry, so this is the approved preliminary plan.
Okay,
And the notes there are PN stands for Pocket Neighborhood. And
okay,
as I look at this, there are 23 building lots that that kind of fit into that scheme. And they're circled, you know, basically 2 smaller pocket neighborhoods with 6 and 4 lots, you know, that they consist of. And then the larger one within the loop road that has 13 lots.
okay.
So that's what was approved, and that's what we were hoping to move forward with. Now,
Okay,
if Chris, if you could put up the drawing of the village staff version.
Let me rotate it around the same direction here. That's the village staff one.
So this is, you know, based on the sketch that we were given, now the dates have escaped me, but some time ago, you know, Chris and Chris's people, you know, put that in a drawing to scale so that everything would, you know, kind of fit properly. And as I look at this, you know, we lose 4 or 5 lots that can't be included in the pocket neighborhood situation because they fall in a straight line along the southern leg of the loop road, on the south side of the southern leg of the loop road adjacent to the Lansing Trails parcel. So those are lost in terms of the pocket neighborhood scenario. And that leaves us with a total of 19 lots that you know, could be considered part of pocket neighborhoods.
Could you define what you mean by pocket neighborhood?
Okay, well, this certainly, and this is going back to the absolute kind of foundation of our plan for development. Our idea was to build a series of pocket neighborhoods, which are properties that orient to one another by having their primary facade, their primary entrance face a common green space, and that would encourage people to interact with one another because, you know, your front doors face one another. There's not a road in between houses to separate, you know, serve as a kind of structural separation. And the whole idea is, you know, to encourage these kind of bubbles of neighborliness. And this concept has been, you know, goes back millennia, but in current times, it's being exercised in the Pacific Northwest. There are many. There's one architect in particular who's spent a lot of time designing these neighborhoods in the Washington State and Oregon, but they're scattered throughout the country. And this particular configuration of building lots and houses, we thought would be very amenable to our kind of target rental market, which is seniors, older folks that are maybe empty nesters who are looking for a rental arrangement where they don't have to worry about exterior maintenance of their properties. And but also with the pocket neighborhood configuration, they would be moving into a neighborhood that would welcome them, and they would be moving into a kind of cohesive community. And that people that have been on the board for several years can attest that this, from day one, has been the plan for the development. And as the plan has, evolved, as is necessitated by, the different zoning rules that have been applied, and the inclination of the planning board, it went from kind of a purely pocket neighborhood development in the very early stages to this one where we're trying to, honestly kind of salvage some of the character, and steer it away from a traditional subdivision of, houses not oriented to one another, that don't encourage interaction between occupants and so on. So sorry if I've been wordy, but I think that in 5 minutes summarizes where we've been and where we want to go, and how important it is to us to have as many of these units laid out in a configuration that encourages this pocket neighborhood concept.
Okay. There any other, so are these are the two alternatives, or this is the one alternative that has been discussed. Is that correct? This particular one that's on the screen at the moment. David, you're on mute again.
Sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button. This is the one that, we were presented by, village staff and consultants.
Okay. All right. And so they're okay. I guess then we're ready to go back to our usual screen. If there's no other.
Can I just pop in and see if I can summarize what I think I heard from David? The original concept was to make the entire development pocket. And for various reasons, it's physically impossible to do that. And so it's evolved to the point where it's now a mixed partial pocket and partial non-pocket neighborhood. And the two possibilities that we just looked at in the last 10 minutes, one has 23 lots in pocket neighborhood configuration, and the one we're looking at now has 19. So there's a net change of 4 properties in going from the double T to the single crossing. So I see that as a necessary evolution. The word necessary is obviously the one that's under discussion for the last few meetings. So I just want to make sure I understand. I appreciate the fact that you've answered both Monica's request and my request in showing us these two possibilities and pointing out what you think is a change in the character of the neighborhood. And by that, I think I now understand you to mean the change being a decrease in the number of properties in pocket neighborhoods. Is that an accurate summary of what you said, David?
Yes, I guess that's accurate. It's a matter of debate as to, how substantial the change is between the two versions.
Okay, I would like to sort of say something. Can you restore the screen for us, Mike Scott? So I can see others. Thanks. I guess I didn't realize until last meeting, Mr. Beer, and now from what you've just said, that there, when you originally came to us with a proposal like 4 years ago or whatever it was, you applied for a PDA. And that was a whole different animal than what we are dealing with here. What we're dealing with here now is a cluster subdivision. And I hadn't realized that you're still thinking in terms of the pocket neighborhood concept. And yet I'm not sure how that fits as well with the cluster subdivision. And so I think that's where some of this has perhaps gone astray. But as far as I'm concerned, the particular project we're dealing with here started with a total new concept in 2019, May of 2019, I think it was. And then we went to the preliminary plat at the time. And I just want to comment also about the preliminary plat. I think we can't totally put behind us the PDA situation, except that it was a different project. I know it was a disappointment for you when we did not feel it was appropriate in that particular setting. But that said, when you came to us with the preliminary plat, I think we all agreed that this seemed to be really a good project for the village, of benefit to the village. We generally liked the concept. And it was based on that, although we voiced some things, which I concede were not totally reflected in the minutes, but I have circled all the intersections on my preliminary plat from taking notes. That this was, in general, this was a concept that we thought was going to work, and let's move forward and figure this out together. And by its very nature, the name preliminary means preliminary. And I think at that time, some things were raised, but the plat had not been looked at by, I mean, you really don't focus at it. You come up with this first preliminary plat and we say, yeah, I think this is really going to work. It looks good. We'll figure out some of this stuff. And you move forward with the preliminary plat with the understanding that there are going to be changes, especially in a cluster subdivision. It's not as straightforward as you said. You don't want a cookie cutter. That's why you chose cluster subdivision. But it's not a PDA. And I guess, as I said, I hadn't realized that you were so totally still in your mindset trying to salvage, I think you just said, or the pocket neighborhood concept. But I think there's some real issues that we really have to work out together before I personally feel we can move forward. We then, the preliminary plat, when people start really focusing on it, like, okay, where's the sewer going to go? What about this and that? Once you start looking at that, you get additional information. And, our engineers start looking at it. We have a professional engineer look at it from outside of our staff. We had our DPW people look at it. We got additional information. And that's led us to where we are today with some of the concerns that we keep raising. And I think even, I don't know, I think obviously the sticking point is the roads and the configurations. And I agree with Tony. It doesn't look like there's a terrible net loss to the concept of the pocket neighborhood. I was wondering if you ever considered some sort of thing where you'd go in on one road and then there'd be a big circle around where all of the backyards would face one another or something like that. Was that ever a consideration for pocket neighborhoods? Have you considered any other options, or would you be willing to?
I mean, just to back up a little bit, that as far as I'm aware now, the objection to the T intersections is based on some safety concerns, primarily for pedestrians. I think in a nutshell, that is what Mr. Courtney's objections have been about. All the other 39 items in Brent and John's list of issues with the preliminary plat, we've kind of, essentially accepted. And it's only this notion of some kind of safety issue with the T's versus a four-way intersection. And I frankly just, in this, has to be considered one of the kind of traffic-wise quietest neighborhoods in the village, how there's any discernible difference between a four-way intersection and two T intersections. And that's why I forwarded the that one report from the Federal Highway Administration that was brought to my attention. That, you know, although that report doesn't exactly buttonhole into this situation, it clearly states that when you have a choice of two T intersections or a four-way intersection, in terms of vehicular conflicts, the T's are more desirable. And, you know, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I would argue if it's safer for cars, I would argue that it's also safer for pedestrians.
Well, I
So
think,
I just don't think the safety concern is valid. And in this super quiet neighborhood, you know, in a neighborhood where these roads are going to serve essentially 25 building lots, how there's going to be enough traffic there to be concerned with it at all. So, you know, it's this safety concern that's driving the village's attitude that, you know, the roads should be reconfigured and a dozen lots reconfigured to accommodate a different intersection design.
well, actually, I did look at that report that you sent, you know, and looked it up. And, you know, we can all sit here and go through that report and each defend our argument. There, immediately following what you suggested was important. There was one that came with replacing T's with a four-way. And I don't want to get into that kind of thing. The whole idea about this is trying to negotiate and work out something. I think also in reference to that, there was the Hannah report, which I read about the characteristics of intersection accidents in rural municipalities, which frankly, I didn't see how helpful that was until I got to the very end when it said that sound traffic engineering analysis and judgment must be followed. So I don't know, I'd like to hear, I know Brent, you have prepared a report for us, but maybe we need to have a little more information from an outside traffic engineering report after we hear from Brent. I don't know, let's hear Brent please let us know.
Sure. So yes, yeah, the report, the Federal Highway Administration report was written specifically to deal with signalized intersections, which
Right.
are high traffic intersections. And as you pointed out, David, that this is a signal, it's not a high traffic signalized intersection. So I just not sure that guidance is applicable to what we're looking at. So as I had offered or agreed, proposed to do at the last meeting, I did spend some time looking at the layout as it would be evaluated in comparing it to the design standards of the village. Starting out by trying to classify the roads, or in this case specifically the loop road aspect of it. And it seemed pretty clear to me that the classification works out to be a local access service road. And the code gives an example that what I think is a similar neighborhood is the Highgate Circle neighborhood, which is kind of a loop type of configuration with, you know, I don't know how many homes are over there, but probably more than this loop road, but clearly not a secondary road and clearly not a dead end road. So the specifications for the local service access road. I went through all of the specs that Hunt Engineers had provided, which they had provided pretty much all of the information, including vertical curve data, which is very detailed, and it was clear as to I was able to verify that most everything about the plan met each individual's design standard specification, with the exception of the curve radius, the horizontal curve radius of the loop road, which for a local access service road is supposed to be 230 feet radius. And I think that the plan shows it at somewhere around about 160. There is a footnote that allows for the developer to ask for a reduction of that radius, subject to truck traffic, if there's limited truck traffic, or in the case, whether the village's trucks can negotiate around the radius. So that's a topic that really never got discussed between the Hunt team and the village team. So that, I think that's one thing that I would say is not yet determined to be compliant. And then the final topic, which is, kind of the one that everybody knows about, is the concern about the intersections. And although David's pointing out that there's a safety concern about pedestrians, it's more to it than that. And one of the aspects that I think becomes new information that requires additional evaluation is the fact that what's not shown on the beer plan is the fact that to the south of this property is the Lansing Trails 3 subdivision, and there's an intersection only something like less than 200 feet from the south edge of the beer property line. And so what you end up with, if you do some quick addition between the intersection of the Lansing Trails Phase 3 intersection and the intersection of what I think is the name, I forgot if where the extension of Millcroft meets over with the main road coming from Craft Road, is a distance of about 650 feet. And in that stretch of 650 feet, there's a total of 4 intersections, two all in as T intersections. And so, I don't think that it's hard to imagine that if you ask somebody if a layout that included 4 intersections within a distance of 650 feet is a good idea, I would say that although I claim to have some knowledge of traffic, I'm not a traffic engineer, but that just doesn't seem like a good idea. And so one of the basis for what we're calling the staff suggestion, which some of the planning board members just saw for the first time just moments ago, was the idea of shifting the loop road almost in its exact geometric configuration, sliding it northerly so that the 1T intersection ends up becoming a 4-way intersection. And that helps move the southern T intersection away from the Lansing Trails 3 intersection. And so there's just be an awful lot of intersections and stopping, and there's a determination of, as I think, as I have said in the past at either meetings open meetings or in working sessions is we can say that one of the through streets is the major traffic and the other one is the minor traffic. And in doing so, we can say today that you only need, say, 1 or 2 stop signs per intersection. But our history within the village is that if we only put up 1 or 2 stop signs at a 3 or 4-way intersection, within a few short years, the trustees end up getting petitioned by the neighbors of the new homes because they don't like the traffic flowing through those intersections without stopping. And then the trustees are faced with deciding to add 4-way stops at a 4-way intersection. So pretty soon at 4 T intersections, you could end up with 12 stop signs at a distance of 650 feet. So it's just hard to say that that's anything of a good design. And if there's an opportunity to make some adjustment, which in my perspective, shifting that road up to create the T intersection doesn't have a major impact. And in fact, one thing I wanted to point out is in David's count, in the one interior of the loop road, you counted 19 lots, but I'm pretty sure that the staff version that we shared with you had 2 more lots where you've got the stormwater feature. And so I think you could get that number up even higher so that the net difference is one or 2. And so I guess I've rambled on long enough, but there, at this point, there's more concerns about, I'm sorry, there is one more detail that I think on, I don't want to speak for John Courtney, but I know in speaking to him, there's a number of things that the extra T intersections presents as long-term obligations by the village. And that's, there's the stop signs, maintenance of the stop signs. There's the maintenance of the painted lines and symbols that have to be taken care of to make those stop signs enforceable by law. If you don't have the right striping and the right signage, then even if somebody were to be given a ticket, they wouldn't even be able to enforce that because the village didn't maintain the distances for the manual of uniform traffic control devices. You've got extra culvert pipes because now you've got more road intersection crossings. And you may also have additional utility intersections with water valves and hydrants on corners of intersections. And so there's just a whole number of things that we never had a chance to interact with Hunt on these types of details. And I think that, these all kind of add up to, especially the one with the Lansing Trails 3 intersection, that kind of all adds up to what I would call new information that needs to be taken into account before a final plat approval is given.
Yes, David Beer?
I guess I have a question about the connection to Lansing Trail 2. When I look at the maps, from what I understand, at any place in a subdivision, you need, any particular location, you need a way in and a way out. And, you can't have dead end roads or cul-de-sacs with more than a certain number of lots.
Right, 20 in this case, yeah.
And when I look at the map of Lansing Trails 2, I don't see where a connection between the Millcroft Way and extension and Lansing Trails 2 is necessary. And if you look at the road map there, I don't see why you know, if you extend, I'm not sure.
Mike, excuse me, Mike, can you bring a map up that can show us what we're talking about? It's
Or I
very
was-
difficult to visualize all this.
Yeah, or I think even Dondi might have a, one that kind of shows that.
Chris, you still got that, don't you? Because Chris has been running it. Do you still have that handy?
I can pull it back up here. Hold on.
So
Yeah,
doing that, I would say that somebody having been through all of the iterations of Lansing Trails over the years, there was a lot of thought and energy put into making sure that Lansing Trails made a provision to allow for connection to the then Miller, the unplanned, unscheduled vacant Miller land. And, you know, I know that there was one other location where the Johnson family was required to make reserve a connection, which later ended up not being utilized, and there was pretty hard feelings over that. And so to go back on that decision would be significant. And so I state that in that I don't think that that would be a simple decision without having Lansing Trails, you know, the current constituent of the what used to be IT construction.
I think that I'm not sure whether it was the last meeting or the meeting before, when suddenly the whole integration of this project we've been focusing on Janivar and all that, but the integration with the future development that has been in place and approved, the cluster subdivision for the Johnson Bonnewell properties, I don't think it really, that information had sort of been, well, don't forget about the fact that that was approved years ago. And it's really something that I feel as a planning board, we have this is an area where we do have a very important obligation to consider how this integrates with the adjacent properties, what's already been approved in those adjacent properties. And just because it's not there now doesn't mean it's going to not happen in 5, 10, even 15 years. You have to plan for that. It's in their plans, actually. And so I will say that this southern, of all the things that we've discussed, and I'm speaking for myself here, aside from the frustration factor of too many stop signs, which I constantly see in Lansing Trails 2, people rolling through, I cannot get past the location of the bottom of the loop there, which totally hems in any buildings that are going to be put there that have been approved for the Bonnewell Johnson properties. You're totally putting a road behind their properties, and they will have a road in front. So if you were to move your loop farther forward, those people actually could share their backyard with your folks, I suppose. But I really do not feel that that is something that can stay without devaluing their property. And I just feel very strongly about that. And I don't think we have a good concept of how that is going to integrate there. But we know that that road that you have there, that last tee is what, how many feet away from their backyard?
Well, as it's
Oh, it's
there, I think
probably
it's
15.
15?
edge of the road, yeah, 15.
But I think, David, you had also said that, you know, the reason why we were retaining this additional land here was to maintain a vegetated buffer between this loop road and these future potential developments on this southern side.
A vegetative buffer doesn't work for me, but I'd like to hear from the rest of my board. I don't know.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What if Chris could go back to the Google map photo, as I recollect, the roadway, the approved roadway for the Lansing Trails 2 kind of Norway goes up a little further to the north and then turns to the east, right? And kind of connects, I guess Chris is putting those lines in there. And
Right.
I understand it, that's how that roadway is supposed to run.
No, no.
No, I don't, no, it isn't. No.
Oh,
I think-
okay. Then please, how is it approved?
The line that Chris just drew on the left-hand side of that box does not exist, will
Yeah.
not exist. It did at one time.
This doesn't exist?
No, it doesn't.
That's not part of the plan anymore. Right.
It actually, that little white part that you, right down there, the 90-degree, right near where your hand just was, that's all there is. It just is this little, that's Ivar's Way and it stops.
And then there's a walking path there that the residents of that area use that connects to other trails in the area that if I had control, I'd show you. If you go up about an inch on the screen, there's a walking trail that connects up and then you start going right there. That's
There you
all
go.
walking trail right there.
Okay.
It was an access road that was used for construction and then it was changed into a walking path that connects to the rest of the pathways in the area.
So the red line that Chris has.
So could you
there-
please complete the red lines for the rest of that?
No,
Actually,
that's it.
Brent, do you think it would help if Dondi put up his map that showed the, well, at least it showed the
So-
connection, I think, with
So
Lansing Trails 3.
Chris, could you draw a line from up at Millcroft Way? Could you draw a red line down to the end of Lansing Trails?
That's about it.
That's what your plan is. That's the plan that, and then there's the loop road off from that, and then there's the kind of the extension of Janivar. So Tony, that's the
Well,
intersection that's,
actually, I think that goes up higher, doesn't it?
That red line, right, the one horizontal red line there, yeah.
I think, yeah, that goes up farther north, doesn't it? Oh,
it's the depth of whatever their building lot is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right about.
because Craft Road kind of goes straight there. I mean, theoretically.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like,
And does Craft Road continue past
No,
Leafs
That's
Way?
no.
Dedicated
No.
park there.
There's
no,
a
it
park
turns
there.
into Leafs Way without further notice.
Okay, thank you.
That lawn area where his hand is,
That's Hickey Park, right?
yeah. And
So
so
it-
at one time, there was a consideration that
Yeah,
might be,
the original map shows like there's a right of way there.
yeah, it was, yep, right there. There was a reservation at one time in case the village chose to activate a road, or that Lansing Trails had no other way to get out. But that's long since passed because once the village created the park there, then the process, that's basically becomes an act of Congress, and I say that almost literally, to change a public park to a private road, or a road for a developer. So that right of way has since gone away.
But you can see that there very well, once that's completed, if and when, and because it's approved, we have to assume it will be, people will use that. So it has to be taken into consideration by us as we're looking at this.
And I think this is the point that was important to make, that this level of information is what we need to give additional consideration to, and I don't think that we had previously contemplated that entire impact. And then to add three more intersections on that that northern part of what Chris drew in, the beer plan calls for 3 T intersections along that length.
Mhm.
Well, it would be nice to have a map that shows the integration, but perhaps I just, and understand the impact on Lansing Trails 3 as well, because for me, that is really just not acceptable the way it is now.
Can I ask a question? So the Lansing Trails 2 project, or maybe it's Lansing Trails 3,
3.
was approved. And can I assume that this portion where right now on the screen we're looking at the horizontal road, that cannot be built on until there's a connection to Millcroft Way, because that would exceed the 20 unit rule in terms of the number of units allowed on a dead end road or cul-de-sac?
It depends on how many it's approved for, I suppose. I mean, generally they are putting 12 and 16 in those townhouses. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, 4 per, I guess, and 3 per. So I think there's the possibility for, well, maybe fewer than 20. I don't know.
Well, the structures, the existing structures there, you know, close to Bomax, I assume constitute at least 10 or 12 units. So there's, you know, maybe 8 more allowed before there's a connection to Millcroft Way. Is that,
Yeah, and I think,
is that correct?
yeah.
I don't, can we answer that?
Well, I think there is a definitive answer, and I think David is bringing up a point, but that issue has been solved in that the Millcroft phase 2 or phase 3 was supposed to be there to do that. So the fact of the matter is that just because the beer plan is coming along, right now on the books, there's a Millcroft subdivision and it calls for a connection there. So, you know, to suggest at this point in time that might not be there is a way big change in the overall evaluation of the traffic pattern.
I'm just pointing out that, you know, if their development is dependent on our construction of the Millcroft Way extension, I mean, it doesn't affect really what we're discussing tonight, but, you know, that's kind of a big issue in that neighborhood. And I just wanted to point that out. And that if there were a way for I guess it's the Johnsons that are still developing there, if there was a way for them to have a second route away from, you know, a loop in that corner of their development, then it would not necessitate a connection to Millcroft Way.
So I think the evolution of that, and this is just right off the top of my head, but if we'd have to go back and look at time. Before there was a Millcroft Way project, then that there was a plan, as Chris had drawn in earlier, that one leg of there was a plan for that in Lansing Trails 3. But I think for Lansing Trails 3, because that's how it loops the road, just like what David was saying. For them to be able to use that, they'd have to have that looped. And then Millcroft came along, and there was an opportunity to approve that project with the connection as it's drawn now. After the Millcroft project was approved, the Johnson group came back to the planning board and reconfigured their subdivision layout such that that connection even farther down, all the way down to, Chris, if you can scroll up a little bit. Yeah, see how it lines up all the way down right to there. That was the original Lansing Trails plan, was to connect all, right in there. But once the village received the Millcroft plan and approved it, then Lansing Trails figured out that they didn't need to have that anymore. And so they were willing to forego that on the basis of what David has observed tonight is that they would need to be patient and wait for the Millcroft project to evolve before they would be able to connect to there.
But it's a very good point, but I still would say though, that whether it gets connected or not, if the loop road is just a little bit north of that horizontal red line, the condominiums that are on that road will be hemmed in by two roads, and that's my concern. And it's something.
I just have to remind you that that's exactly how it was drawn in the preliminary approval.
Of course, yes, I'm fully aware of that, David. However, we did not say, and this is it. It was preliminary. Like I tried to explain, this is how we usually do these things. They are preliminary. Then you start really focusing and asking your staff and professionals to really focus. It's a general concept. I think, and then so many things were changed between that and the final plat that was submitted to us. I think it's important to recognize too that there have been some, we've talked about changing lot sizes, the cluster subdivision situation. We've changed lot sizes. We have allowed the garage to be moved, the wetlands you had changed. All these things are not, they're not part of the preliminary plan. And yet somehow it's okay to go in that direction. But when we raise this concern, so many of those 39 things were simply things that had to have the code be brought into compliance with the code. So, I honestly don't consider that, but it has always been our practice to generally agree to the preliminary plat. If I feel our code is pretty clear that, and we can even ask for information, additional information, even with a final plat. And I guess I'm coming to the point where if this is the sticking point, my sticking point is that road behind the future condominiums, number one. Just because we have to, as a planning board, we have to consider other things. Their subdivision has been in place for many, many years. And that's important. And then I just think, just looking at this from a practical standpoint, if you start putting little circles in where all the stop signs are going to have to be, it just doesn't seem to make good design sense to me. And I think, is the pocket concept like the tail wagging the dog in a certain way? You still have a lot of pocket concept, it seems to me. But this we don't have a code for a pocket neighborhood. We have a code for a cluster subdivision. And we're trying to make it work for you and for us. And I don't feel as though this is working for me. I don't know. I'd like to hear from some other members of my board if they have any concerns. I'll start with you, Mike Baker.
Sorry, I was just looking at the map. No, I mean, I think that, for one, I'm definitely not ready to make a decision on anything. I think that there's, some things that we're talking about tonight and some input from David, that, for one, I need time to digest and maybe, talk to Brent and Mike and, John and Dottie about and sort of get their opinions on some of those things, but, I guess that's my big thing. And I am concerned about, one, obviously the safety of the road, that's not a big secret. I think everyone here is well aware of that. But then, right, also as future development is done outside that area, that's only gonna, add to things. And I think that, especially in recent history, decisions that we've made in the past, and not just this board, but previous boards have come back to, bring up concerns. And I think that everyone's heart is in the right place on the board in making sure that, we're doing our due diligence and, reviewing everything that's come to light, as we've learned more, to make sure that in the future, we don't create another problem in the village when there's already some that we're trying to clean up.
Tony, you're next in line.
It's very difficult for me to talk about these things without seeing drawings. I'm an engineer. So I'm going to make a request that I think will enable us to clarify what are now two major issues. Can we juxtapose the current beer proposed arrangement with the arrangement that was created by board staff? We saw that at the beginning of this meeting. Can we juxtapose those, please? Put them next to each other.
Tonight, this minute. I don't know if we can. Can
Well, we
somebody-
just saw a juxtaposition of two plans. All I'm asking is that instead of having those two plans, you have the
I'm
current
getting it, Tony.
beer and the one that was created. Thank you.
So the one on the left, Tony, is the preliminary approved plat. The
Right.
one on the right was the concept that the village staff created and provided,
Okay.
similar to it.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to see. And it enables me to say what I want to say, which is the plan that we have on the right addresses both issues that have been discussed tonight. The issue of eliminating one of the four intersections over 650 feet and not having lots that eventually will be built in Lansing 3 being squeezed between two roads. Am I making myself clear?
Clear to me.
Yes, no, maybe? Yes or no? I think what I just said is what I wanted to say. The plan that we see on the right on the screen would have the lots at the southern edge of the beer property backing up to the northern edge of the lots in the Lansing 3 property, as opposed to having the lots in the Lansing 3 property being sandwiched between the road in their subdivision and the road in the beer subdivision. And that's something that Lisa just made very clear she doesn't like, and neither do I, and neither would the owners of those lots. So I'm asking, and I'm trying to be as open and accepting as I possibly can be to the beers here. You've done wonderful ideas. You've stuck with it. You've been very dogged working with us. You're working with a good engineering firm to try to express your ideas and plans. You came to the planning board with the idea of being different. We like the idea of being different. And at this point, we seem to be stuck on what appears to me to be diminishing returns for discussion. You're saying that you're just barely salvaging 19 pocket neighborhood lots. And I think what I heard Brent say is that number isn't quite right. That as opposed to the 19 that are shown in the document on the right, there's a few more than that. Am I saying that correctly, Brent?
Yeah,
The problem is, Tony, is you lose the location for this stormwater retention facility for a bioretention area to get to the larger basin for this area out here.
Who's speaking?
This is Chris Wood, the
Oh,
engineer.
I'm sorry.
So that's why those two lots were not put in there. We didn't feel that we could relocate this bioretention area to meet the stormwater requirements of both the village code and
Okay,
the
okay.
DEC.
Okay, so then what I said earlier in the meeting still holds. We're going from 23 properties with pocket neighborhood characteristic, which is what we see on the left, to 19 properties with pocket neighborhood characteristic on the right. But in both cases, it's a mixed neighborhood. It's not a pure pocket neighborhood. The development is not a pure pocket neighborhood development. It's a mixed development. It's partly pocket neighborhood and it's partly not pocket neighborhood in both cases. So it's just a matter of degree. And I think at this point, having worked on this design for 4 years, I think that I'm supplicating, I'm begging the beers to just say, okay, let's go with the design on the right and everybody will be happy. Not everybody will be as happy as they could be, but at least you can move forward and the planning board can move on to other things, because we're back in a situation now where the planning board is spending an enormous amount of its time exclusively devoted to one development. And that's not fair to other potential developments coming along, other potential projects coming along for the village. Enough said. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Very nicely said, actually. So Jim, I think Macaulay, could we hear from you too, please?
I think that Mike and Tony have both made really good points. I'm not sure what I can add. I think Tony's comments were well stated. Makes the valid point of the plan on the right seems to address a lot of the concerns that were raised. I don't really have too much to add. It would be helpful at some point if, I don't know whether it be tonight, but when we saw the photo, we have drawings, but we also saw the photograph. If the roads under the different plans could be drawn onto that aerial photograph with the red lines. I don't know if that you can do that or not, but I think it would be helpful for me to visualize this a little bit better.
So we would like to, I think that gets back to the point of how it integrates with the adjacent property to the south as well, because we already have how it attaches to Millcroft and to Jan or Craft Road, but we don't have that portion. I think we do need to see that so that we understand how it will integrate with that. What now, if Mr. Beer, are you agreeable to going back to revisiting the one on the right that we just looked at? Or do you?
I believe Ray has a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ray Schlatter.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair Shaline. I understand what everybody is saying, but I guess my question is, and since we're kind of in a negotiation here, there are two thoughts. The one is that just because the division to the south, and could you, Chris, could you put up that Google map, please, for a second? All right. Now, if you take Craft Road, the boundary line between the properties is actually the extension of Craft Road. Craft Road is on the south edge of the boundary line, right there. So that red line is actually a little bit, the horizontal red line is actually northerly than what it probably ought to be. You can see where there's a car right below the northeast corner of that one right there. That's about where the road ought to be. And my thought is, and I understand that you have a walking trail that emanates from AO Way and it goes up to the south of what appears to be some wooded area and downslope area. But I guess the question is, why couldn't that particular subdivision, they can get the same amount, presumably they're only going to be building on one side of that road. Why couldn't that red line be moved slightly south and then intersect so that you could then have a very large buffered green area that would be on the north side of that road and the south side of the loop road? In other words, that would all just be kind of like a wild green area as opposed to trying to cram houses backyard to backyard. That's the first point. And then the second point is, all right, if you were to go with, Mr. Ingraffia's proposal and Baker and all that, which I understand the wisdom of that, but if you were to go with that proposal, are you prepared then, given that the Ivar Johnson property is all going to be townhouses? So are you prepared to allow townhouses to be built on the south side of that loop road? And if you go back to the right sketch, Chris. If you go to the right sketch and in the area that is south of the loop road, right in there, are you prepared to allow those, at least in that area right along the boundary, to be townhouses? I mean, that might be the solution. We'll just put more dense housing in that area, which will be back to back to whatever townhouses Ivar Johnson puts in his project, or his successors put in his project.
This is, I just want to mention that this is something that Mr. Schlatter has just come up with this moment on his own.
Oh, yeah. No. There's no.
There's been no discussion with me, but it's the type of compromise that could bring us around in perhaps agreeing to going along with the village scheme, because that would be in all these discussions. It's bothered me that there, with the exception of the narrow approval of the Quonset hut construction, kind of unrelated, I've never seen in 4 years a move toward compromise on the village's part on any aspect of this project. And this would be an opportunity for the village to allow us some denser construction that would make your scheme more palatable.
First of all,
Can I?
I have to
Lisa,
object.
wait, Mike has a comment.
I can't see. Go ahead, Mike.
Mine's a quick comment that how does putting townhouses on there solve the issue of making it more of a pocket neighborhood?
Doesn't.
We're kind of getting off track of what your original issue is with moving the.
Well, that's right, Mike. With that notion of moving the south leg of the loop road up away from the property line and having building lots on the property line, those could never be part of the pocket neighborhood. Well, you guys are asking me to forego those in terms of getting them to, fit into the pocket neighborhood concept. Well, I'm saying, okay, I'll go along with that, but maybe we should be allowed to build something denser, and there, might be some fiscal advantage to us to be able to put in a dozen townhouse units rather than 5 or 6 single family units or something like that.
Mike Scott, help me to, I don't know if the cluster subdivision allows for townhouses. First of all, if you go, well, and I don't know, I hope I'm saying this correctly, but it was my understanding that with a cluster subdivision, you are allowed the same number of housing units that you could have had if you just divided it under the standard subdivision rules. But you're setting aside things so you can go up to duplexes. But I did not know, it seems to be sometime in the past, with with a previous code officer that when I say, well,
Yep.
when they say, well, no, that's a townhouse, so that's different. And so I feel as though this is opening up a whole different thing. And as in terms, I'd like to first of all be sure about that, but as I recollect, we have made several compromises. I really take exception to that because one of them was changing the lot sizes to be less than the usual. So that, and that was something that was, to my mind, that was a compromise. I felt that we worked very nicely with that one. I don't know, I guess.
But isn't that the whole concept of the cluster subdivision? You have the same number of lots, but they're smaller and you set aside a green area. That's not a compromise. That's allowing for the cluster subdivision configuration, which is granted by statute. You didn't give us anything there. We can do that by right.
Lisa, as what you were pointing out before, that's part of the cluster subdivision is you cannot build more lots than what would be allowed in that district originally.
Lots, not units, not housing units.
But I think that as an example, isn't Lansing Trails a example of what would allow that?
Yeah, Lansing Trails is a cluster subdivision.
Yeah. So in townhouses there, or I don't know if you call them, I'm not sure what you classify their buildings as, but as long as you stayed within the equal number of dwelling units, I think that the cluster law does allow you to approve a densification of those. I don't know what the financial benefit is. David, you might know if is it just, beneficial because it's easier to build one building with 6 units than to build 6 buildings with 1 unit.
Yeah. Mhm.
I mean, I haven't analyzed all the different permutations of this, but, another idea that's just occurred to me is, though that area along the southern boundary, that consists of, as drawn in the village version, 5 building lots. Take that out of the cluster subdivision and treat that area separately as standard medium density. And Mike, Scott, could you say whether in medium density are townhouses allowed and what are the lot size requirements and stuff?
You're gonna have to throw something more specific at me at this point, David. I know where you're going with this, and I'm not trying to be rude or anything. It's just you're throwing a big concept here to me that I can't figure. You're talking about cutting your land, some of it into a cluster subdivision, some of it into a standard subdivision. I mean, you're gonna end up reconfiguring. If your cluster subdivision is going to be smaller, now you're reconfiguring the open space. You're reconfiguring a whole lot more than just moving the.
Sure, I understand. Can I just make the question simpler? Are townhouses allowed in medium density, in the medium density zone?
Medium density, without looking everything up, David, I would say it's just basically a lot. It's a single unit. It's not a triplex or anything because they are all separate parcels. Each one of the townhouses are separate parcels. So they're basically considered single family units. So yes, I would have to say without looking up, I would say yes, it would have to be allowed.
Yeah, because I think that the trick of a townhouse or the zoning consideration with a townhouse is that you're allowed 0 side lot setbacks. I mean, that's what allowed, like you said, the units are on their own lots and, but they have 0 side lot setbacks. That's what lets you.
But I would still like to see an example before I'm put on the record and say, yes, you can do something or no, you can't do something.
Sure. No, I realize this is getting complicated now.
Yes, it is.
And
Can I make a point?
I'm just.
Can I make a point,
curious.
please?
Who's speaking?
This is John.
Oh, yes, John, go ahead.
I think when we're talking about the pocket neighborhood, I hate to go back a little bit, but there was a deficit of 4. So it was deficit of 4 or 5. So it was 19 versus 21 or 22, something like that. I can't remember. 23. Was it 23?
Yes,
He originally had only 22 lots. So he actually picked another lot up on that whole development, the way the village's concept was. The original plan only had 22 on that one side, and now he picked up an extra one. Donnie and I were just counting them up. So I mean, he picked up a lot. It's not like there was a deficit of lots there. Am I correct, Chris?
Well, can I just point out that, we're limited to the total number of lots based on the calculations to do the cluster subdivision. So the fact that there was, the way things laid out, there was room for another lot, doesn't matter. We aren't allowed to build on another lot. So that's kind of a non-issue.
well, I think, I don't know whether do you think it's advisable at this point, if you want to adhere to the plan that you have submitted with the loop road as it is, which we have some problems with, should we get an outside traffic engineer study to consider some of that? Does the board want that? Or what additional information does the planning board feel it needs to move forward or not move forward? I think,
May I just make a comment? This meeting has been, in my mind, one of the more productive ones in terms of sharing ideas and trying to move this whole thing forward. If we could continue on in this dialogue, I think we could, come to some genuine agreement on, how this thing should move forward. If you don't want it to be done tonight, I'm more than willing to meet at any time to kind of just continue this discussion. Frankly, I came into this, with, not feeling very optimistic, but, you guys have demonstrated that you're willing to talk about it. And the idea that Ray threw out there of, putting townhouses on the one boundary, to me sounds like it may go a long way towards solving some of these problems. And like I said, if you don't want to continue talking tonight, I would suggest, and I would hope we could get together maybe in a less formal venue and keep jawboning this until we get to something that we're all comfortable with.
Is there, Lisa or Mike, is there a provision for something like that? You know how in like I think it's in a PDA, there's like a developers conference. Is there a provision for something like that or not? In a kind of to me what David's asking for.
well, I think, no, you have open meeting law. I mean, it depends.
Yeah, that's right.
So up to 2 of us could meet with David. But beyond that, no, because we really can't make decisions for the board. That has to, but the open meeting law precludes us doing that.
The PDA requires a developers conference.
Okay, maybe that's what I was
Cluster
thinking.
doesn't.
But what can be done is, first of all, I think there are some ideas, and I think probably we have to think about it. But David, I think you certainly do, about what might work for you and what you would like to propose. And, knowing what the concerns are regarding the roads, I do think we need to see a bigger picture kind of how this integrates with the adjacent property to the south. I think that's one of the major concerns of the board. And beyond that, I think, yeah, like I said at the beginning, the planning board was really pleased with the general concept, and we feel it's a good project for the village and of benefit to the village and for the future of the village. So I'm hoping, yes, that we can perhaps not salvage all of your desire for the pocket neighborhood, but hopefully get as close as possible for you and also meet our concerns as well. So I'm certainly thinking if there's another, board member that would be willing, we could meet. But I think the peril of that is we can't make decisions. We can make suggestions and come to a closer agreement with staff and input and whatnot. But the final decision is the full board decision. And that's the important thing to remember in the open meeting law.
Well, I totally understand that, but I think even with 2 board members, that would be much more productive than, me and Chris stabbing in the dark with ideas that, don't have a chance of flying with you guys. So it would be much more efficient if we could, talk to 2 board members and staff and hash out some of these things. And, I understand it's got to be voted on by the whole board.
Right.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes, Mr. Schlather.
Thank you. I've heard the concerns that staff has brought up. Mr. Cross has made them very clear. Are there any others that have not been brought up? In other words, if those are the 2, that basically the south side of the South Loop Road, and it's running into the backyards of Johnson's property. And the other one is the question of the intersections, the number of intersections, number of T intersections. Are there any other issues that we should be aware of?
Well, Brent,
we still have the issue that Brent brought up about
Brent,
the radius of the loop.
Yeah.
Oh, radius, yes. So how can that one? Does anybody here, perhaps John, Mr. Courtney, or somebody? Can somebody say whether there are any village vehicles that are that you perceive a problem is? In other words, is there any equipment that can't make that radius?
John, are you there? Or
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. It's see, if efficiently with a snowplow, the snow has to every once in a while relieve itself from the plow, or it just becomes congregated in front of the blade and spills around the blade, and you can't do an efficient job. So to answer your question, we are going to have issues the way it's designed right now. We will have issues because if you look at a lot of the designs, there's usually a little straightaway in between the next 90-degree turn, and that one's just a complete loop right around. So you carry the snow the whole distance around in front of the blade before it can escape the blade. So it's going to be problematic, and that's one thing that Brent brought up today, and we were going to work on that. Another issue is there's 2 different pressure zones. Dondi and I were looking at them the other day. There's 2 different pressure zones this development is going to be fed off from, and we're concerned that not looping the water lines together is going to be an issue. So there's a lot of stuff that we haven't had a chance to review yet because we don't have the new set, the 39 changes you guys made. We would like a chance to kind of get to review that so we can. It takes a long time to review that stuff. So there is a couple more issues, but I think if we can put our eyes on a plan set, that's I think we can get a lot of this stuff resolved.
So if I may follow up on that, may I, Madam Chair?
yes, please go ahead.
In terms of, Chris, could you put up the village's sketch, please? I'm trying to figure out where the radius, are you talking about basically the east end?
Yes.
Right there? Okay. So that conceivably if the south, I don't mean to get into this problem here, but by squeezing the distance between the 4-way and the T, you've created that problem. So if we moved it back down to the bottom as it was before, we would probably solve that problem. Is that?
It was always there.
Yeah, no, it's just
The
the
first
same.
version was the same.
But this is considered an access road, correct? A local service and
Yes.
access road under, as far as your definition. So if
Correct.
you read minimum radius of horizontal curves, local service road, 230 feet,
Right.
Correct.
access road, 125 feet. And I believe Brent, you said we were just over 160 feet in that
Right.
horizontal curve.
That's what I believe, yes.
So we're exceeding an access road design standard of 125 feet for that horizontal curve.
Well, it's specific, the footnote is specific to truck traffic, and John duly pointed out that, you know, a source of truck traffic is village trucks. And so I think that it just deserves, this would be my suggestion, is it seems like there is a chance to compromise, and I don't think that we know at this minute in time sitting here is 160, the proposed at 160, which is halfway between the, you know, somewhere in the middle of the 125 and the 230. I don't think it's fair, be fair for John to be asked if that works or not without, you know, we would need to go and take a look at it. What his point was, though, is that almost irrelevant of the degree of radius or the radius length is that a 180-degree turn, no matter how big the turn is, tends to pile up the snow on his blade. And so
Yeah.
I think that there's lots of good, I mean, I'm very happy to hear that at least we have a reason to have another meeting and we can talk about this. And I think that there's a reasonable chance to sit down and look at, you know, data on what John's snowplows are and give Chris some feedback as to, you know, what would work for John. And maybe that could be built into a revised plan or, you know, a variation of that plan if David's going to come back with, you know, a modified proposal.
Can I just ask, I mean, to me, it seems like an obvious question. Is there any reason, John, that the snowplows can't make two passes counterclockwise going around that loop and fling the snow to the outside on both passes?
There's a lot of case laws where if the snowplow is traveling in the oncoming lane, the snowplow is in danger. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. So there's case laws. It happened in several counties around here. Portland is one of them, where snowplow is over the center line and they were held liable. They were fatalities. I'm not saying this is going to be a fatality situation, but you're at fault when you're in the opposite lane. So you cannot do that.
I don't see there being a major problem with finding locations to offload either clockwise or counterclockwise. I'm looking at that. And when going around counterclockwise, you can offload at 2:30, you can offload at 11:30, and going clockwise, you can offload at 1 o'clock. There's space.
So you're saying, Tony, is to stop and push the snow off to the side? Is that what you do?
Yeah.
That's not efficient at all. I mean, that's not, I mean, we're a staff of 3 people and we got 20 some miles of road to plow, 38 lane miles. It would be very problematic to do something like that. The only thing I was thinking.
I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing, John.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The only thing I was thinking is maybe we could straighten the east line up and down a little bit. If you could get some houses in there to straighten it down a little bit, make it a little sharper turn down at, I can't see the numbers on it, but down a little bit. I think we need just to sit down and work on it. I do.
You're talking to the right. Okay, down under number 2, sort of there. Are you, John, is that where you mean under the number 2?
No, under the number 12, under the 12.
Yeah, well, that's what I meant, under the 2, yeah.
Yeah, so if you come straight down and put a sharper bend there, and if you can get some houses on that eastern line, you know, you could make things a little bit better, so you have at least a straightaway path in between the other 90-degree turn.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I can't.
I think I'm pleased to say that I think, yeah, okay. It seems that what we need to do is kind of take a step back, kind of come together and revisit some of these ideas. And David, if you can come up with, if you want to propose some, more townhouse things, knowing what our concerns are, accommodating those as best you can, and trying to maintain some of your vision, that we can manage to talk. Mike Scott?
I was just David, I was just thinking that, part of my job and what I'd be glad to do is if you and Chris wanted to have a meeting to discuss what the parameters are for a cluster subdivision, as well as what's allowed in each zoning district and something like that. I mean, I can't go as far as help laying something out, but at least I can help you at that point figure out a possibility of what you could do if it's something that you want to change with. I would do that with any developer, and I'd be happy to do it with you guys if you want to take that as a first stepping stone.
Well, as I've said many times, I think none of these problems that we're all experiencing are going to be resolved without greater communication. So I'd be happy to talk with you, but first and foremost, kind of get ideas out on the table, but from you all have some assurance that once we chase these ideas in terms of design time and money, that we're going in the right direction, and not that you send us off in one direction without being candid about what possibilities are. That's all.
Well, I think we can.
We're candid.
Yep, I would say we can be more candid if you would like. But no, David, I think it's really, you bring up a good point. I think it's really important that we just be, it's called an open meeting law. I feel very strongly that we should be just discussing all of this in open meeting as much as possible, because there's no reason not to. And I think that, well, I just think we need to give this another go and sort of take a step back and see if we can get back on the right foot, because somewhere along the way, I think we kind of got apart. But again, I can't stress enough that we feel this is a very good project for the village, and we want to make this work if we possibly can. But we do have some other considerations that we have to take into account to protect others as well. And you would want us to do those same things and take those same things into consideration, I'm sure, if you are one of the adjacent properties. So I think we just need to be mindful of all of that. But there's always solutions. It's just, as Tony said, we're not all going to be as happy as we might want to be, but we can all be happy, I think, with this if we work together.
I would just think, from the very beginning, years ago, we've always asked for guidance from you guys in terms of what you guys would deem acceptable versus not. And, I remember more than once hearing from the board that it wasn't your job to design this thing for us. Okay, but you should give us guidance before we chase ideas down to a dead end, which is really what I think happened with this preliminary approval. The idea that, now at the dozenth meeting, the roadway along the southern boundary is a big issue. I don't disagree. Maybe it is an issue, but it should have come up a long time ago, not in the dozenth meeting.
Well, I think you stated it very well last time, though, regarding when I queried you as to why you had made changes without talking to us. And you said, well, you learn more things about the property, or you learn more things. New information came up. David, I guess I wasn't clear enough in that we did not have input from our DPW yet. It was a preliminary plat. Things change. We've had all sorts of changes get made after the preliminary in many cases, and rightfully so, because new things come to light. And it turns out, somebody might have to blast, and now they don't want to blast. So now we got to change this or that. So these things do happen, but we got additional information about this, and all of a sudden somebody sort of says, wait a minute, how is this going to work? And everybody doesn't think of everything right out of the gate, just as nobody does. And then so it's a flaw perhaps that we didn't do that. I don't know. I feel it was, our main goal was to basically say, yeah, we really like the concept. Let's see how we work this out. And this is just part of that, working it out as far as I'm concerned.
I've said enough in terms of my gripes. You know where I'm coming from. Yeah, I really look forward to advancing this plan, and in having a thorough communication all along the way with everyone involved with the village.
So you want to get in touch with Mike Scott and set something up?
Certainly, but I'd also like to go back to your idea of having a couple board members in on all these discussions.
Well, but Mike is our point man, so you would work through Mike. You're expecting a Zoom meeting, I presume, or did you mean in person? Because I'm not sure we're comfortable with meeting in person yet.
In person's always better in my opinion, but whatever people are comfortable with.
Okay, just thought I'd ask. Mike, so we'll have, is it okay to have David get in touch with you?
Yeah, hey, David, you can get in touch with me. And like I said, if I can meet with you guys as far as what the, what the parameters are for a cluster subdivision and zoning. And if you've got questions about like what Mr. Slather brought up, whether you can incorporate townhouses within that, then, we can look at that. We can look that over and find out what can and can't be done. After that, it's just a matter of if you've got a different layout, then that's going to be all up to the planning board.
Right, Brent?
Yeah, and I think that, it might be helpful if Chris and, the John and Dondi and I had maybe a Zoom and could talk about some of those issues that we were getting kind of into the details of, about the snowplows and that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I think it would be great if you, I think David, if you would work with Mike so that you get some idea of what you can and cannot do, so that you then can come, before we get board members involved, you sort of just, and it can be a napkin drawing, we don't really care, but you sort of just give us a basic layout so that we can say, yeah, this looks reasonable. I think this might be okay. But why don't you start with that so you know what you can do, so that you can be thinking about how you might put some of those elements together in a different layout. And then we'll take it from there. And then Mike, you'll set up perhaps a meeting with John and Chris and Dondi and Brent.
Yes.
Okay, great. I think that's it then, unless anybody has any other comments they would like to make.
Are we then on to keep this moving? Can we assume we'll be back on, February 8th is the next meeting?
No, January, we have 2 meetings a month.
Oh, how about the first one? Well, do you think we can get all this done in the meeting?
The next one is the 25th of January.
David, can we meet that?
I'm not sure there'll be time for some of this other stuff to happen first, which might be more fruitful, but I don't know. What do you think, David?
I have no idea. I think we should get started on it if we can get something developed that's worth the planning board spending its time on, then sooner is better than later. But
Why don't we get on tentatively?
Next week or so.
Yeah, I can basically put you on the agenda for the 25th, and if it happens that you're not prepared, then we will just table it into the next meeting.
I think that would be the right move, Mike. I'd appreciate that.
Not a problem.
Yeah, the next one is not until February the 14th because of the way the month falls. So
Why don't we do it as suggested, January 25th, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so we'll expect you back then. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving along. We have next on the agenda, other business, is Mike Scott had sent to all of us. He wants to just review the proposed exterior lighting law. We had voted to move the, recommend the lighting law to the trustees. But Mike was looking it over and he passed it by Jody, saying, what do you think of this kind of thing, and with fresh eyes, and she had some very good input, and so he's made some suggested changes that he would like us to go back and revisit this a little bit to clarify some areas and give some new definition in terms of some of the issues. Like Jody had questions when she was reading that he thinks we need to tighten it up. So one of the things, so I want to go ahead, Mike, and tell us just kind of quickly, I think everybody has this, or do you want to bring it up on the screen?
I'll bring it up, and basically all I did was had Jody be devil's advocate and have someone as though she was coming in to present something, have questions. Most of it was what I'll get to in a minute here, and that was for section 3, the temporary lighting. The rest of it that I sent you that is in red, basically I consolidated a few areas, didn't take any of the meeting, for no meeting be any different, but I consolidated them because we were a little bit repetitive in a couple of areas, and I just basically kind of cleaned it up. So the intent is the same, and hopefully you looked those over and saw that I did not leave anything out. What I am suggesting, as we read through E3, the temporary exterior lighting, I just think every time you read through it, I had more questions, and there really wasn't any definition of what is temporary. If someone asked me, well, what is a temporary light? I couldn't tell you because I don't have a definition of it. And beside that, there was, it made this area where there's A, B, and C, it made it a little bit more cumbersome. So what I'm suggesting is, and I believe I sent it to you. Let me pull it up. For temporary lighting, we'll try to keep it simple. Basically, what I have in blue here, and then temporary exterior lighting is permitted by the village code unless lighting causes disability, glare, or to motorists, pedestrians, or cyclists, and an annoyance on light trespass in neighboring properties. What I'm looking for is a defined term of temporary exterior lighting. I've got here any exterior lighting design for the use of less than 30 days, such as holiday lights. Does that, in your opinion, does that kind of grasp what we're looking for here, or what I'm kind of generally heading towards? Is it too simple? Does it need to be more defined? I guess it's something that we really need to discuss real quick.
Well,
maybe I'm looking at it too close, but I just had to look at it as though if someone asked me a question, I have to be able to point to something and defend it. So
I thought I had sent you some definitions that I had uncovered years ago. Is this part of the mystery stuff that never got to you?
I believe so, Lisa, because that doesn't.
Oh, darn.
You and I are having all kinds of issues with this.
Because I would like a little more definition, because I think I like the fact that an annoyance or light trespass, that's really important. But usually they have duration of some nature. Almost all of them. I looked specifically, I was looking at the town of Ithaca because they're so close by, and they were a little more vague, I think, about that. But I guess what I would suggest is, unfortunately, I will send it around to everyone. And if you don't get it, I'll be sure, just so that we could take a look at maybe having, because I think temporary needs some sort of definition. What I wanted to ask, though, something that's been bothering me, and all of a sudden I realized that when you brought this up is, so in the past, when we've had a subdivision and it's residential, such as Lansing Meadows, for example, I think I asked, why don't we have, can't we ask for dark sky compliant fixtures? And you said it's residential?
Oh,
And
the
so
re-
there, is that correct?
The residential fixtures that go attached to the building are, most of them are the dark sky compliant. If they have lighting that's going to be on the street lighting, for example, if Lansing Meadows had street lighting, then they would have to go through the lighting commission to have that approved.
But if it's so, but even if so, it's nice that they usually are dark sky, but can we insist that they be dark sky in a subdivision, for example? I mean, at one point when dark
Are you
sky,
talking about on a residence or are you talking about
yes,
street
I'm
lighting?
talking about on a residence.
So you're referring to people who like to have spotlights in their backyard? in their
Yeah,
front yard?
yeah,
Yeah,
because, or let's put it this way, if you have someone who has those things and it trespasses onto your property, does this code give us the right to have someone complain and get it changed?
I don't know, let me look deeper into that. I know what you're trying to say. If
yeah.
even if it were a single family home.
Yeah.
And they had a side yard like to let the dog out,
Yes,
something like that. That's a good point. Let me look farther into this.
but what really occurred to me is we're talking about major subdivisions, perhaps at very least. You know, if they aren't dark sky compliant on the house, which if we don't, request that or whatever, now maybe it comes through, we can request it by special permit in a way, but it's like, it used to be that dark sky compliant fixtures were, more expensive, unattractive. That's no longer the case. In fact, most of them probably are, but with the whole advent of LEDs, people replace those lights sometimes, and it can be a problem. And I just want to be sure that if we're going to do this, that we really have thought that through, especially in.
I think that some of this, as I've got this up here, some of this could be included in the opening statement where it says exterior lighting should be carefully designed, located, installed, and directed in such a manner. It doesn't say anything about commercial or residential or subdivision. I mean, it basically is saying all exterior lighting. But like I said, let me look into it a little bit more, Lisa. It's a good question.
Or maybe
Mike,
it should
can
be.
We'll get to it. I promise.
John, are you
The
trying
lighting
to?
commission and Mike will get to it. We promise.
Okay,
Yeah.
John,
Yeah, I just almost drew a blank. We have a non-conforming part to this, right?
We do have a non-conforming part that if it does trespass over, it's just, this is starting to get into something, a large quantity of issues. I mean, you're talking about, say we build a house or they put in the, say, Ivar's project, the Lansing Trails 2, their outside lights, say they put a side light on there just for safety issues, while trespasses on someone else's property. It's just, that gets into quite a bit.
That's where we have the non-conforming side of it, though. I mean, that's what I thought we were doing a good job with, non-conforming lights.
But we
need to, I don't want to push it through and have mistakes, but we know we're going to have amendments down the road to this. I think we got to get something so we can at least get our teeth into certain projects with lighting. That's my concern, is we have no guidance at all right now. And that's why it's so important to get some kind of a template down into law and then make modifications as developers are confused, or we can do it down some of this stuff down the road too, right? Or no?
well, I guess, John, I don't think it's going to take much, because the only concern I have is that when we first start out, we say exterior lighting should be carefully designed, blah, blah, blah. But then it goes into any new upgraded or change of location to the exterior lighting within, and it's only commercial districts. And all of a sudden I thought, is that going to be misinterpreted by people? Or are they going to say, oh, well, this is a house, so it doesn't apply to me, kind of thing. That's what I'm concerned about. Because when it comes to residential, large residential subdivisions, I think it could be an issue, even if they don't have street lights, you know? So
I think there is room in this for, let's say, new, like you said, Lisa, new residential lighting, whereas John's correct, if there's an existing non-conforming lighting, like
Yeah.
if someone's light is shining out onto a neighbor, they can always, you know, complain about it, or I can
Yeah.
see it, and then they have to change it to
right.
as in regulation G. Well, there's nothing really in there about someone coming in to build a new house. So maybe there should be some, send it back to the lighting committee and see if we can put some wording in there for new residential construction or something like that. Just something simple. I don't think it's a.
I don't want it to be burdensome, and I agree, John. Oh my gosh, I was working on this over 7 years ago, and here we are. So I'm anxious to have this done too.
No, this is all part of the process. This is why it's come back to you.
And I would also, if you do want this to be applicable for residential and all residential, then I think that should be clearly stated, because I do think B leads to some confusion.
Yes, I do actually. Yeah. Just another paragraph, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think it could be very simple, but I think it should be made very clear if you want this to apply to residential.
I do too. Okay, so lighting commission,
Okay.
Mike, you're gonna pass it by, and I will send everybody the temporary lighting stuff that I came up across with. But we've got to figure out why stuff is not getting. We're gonna have to be sure. Okay, so I wanted to find out, first of all, before I forget, is everybody going to be here at the next meeting on the 25th of January? We don't know at this point what the governor is going to do about live meetings, but
We're not going to have live meetings.
well, I mean, the thing is, I think we know that now, but why can't they tell us that?
It's been general practice that they'll probably let us know on the 13th or 14th, because the 15th is the deadline.
Exactly, 14th at 4:30 in the afternoon. But we will definitely know before our next meeting. So provided that we, our meeting via Zoom and all, I'm assuming everybody is available?
If we're meeting by Zoom, yes.
Yes, well, that's how I feel too. Okay, the other thing is that just wanted to let everyone know that, you know, that whole property that Cornell had made a request in the past to the trustees to change from MDR to HDR is beginning to come to life again. So that just be thinking about that. And I was hoping, that we were going to maybe not need to do this, but we are very fortunate that we have, well, you know, that we need to have fill our alternate member position. And I was hoping at our next meeting to do have, you know, brief interviews. We have 2 people who are interested actually in possibly joining us. And so I don't know, I guess it depends a little bit on whether or not they are available at the next meeting, number 1, and number 2, whether we think we're going to have time if the beers are on there. What do you think, Mike Scott? Is there anything else on the agenda?
Not at this point. Not at this point.
Okay, so I would like to try to do that at our next meeting if at all possible.
Who are the 2 people?
Well, they're with us tonight, actually. We have Susan Ainsley, who I don't know if you can see Susan. She's been coming to our meetings, and Pat Gillespie, who you may know from the BZA.
Okay, I knew Susan was one of them. I didn't know there was a second one.
Well, it's a rather unusual situation for us. We're very pleased to see people interested, actually. It's wonderful. And so I will be checking with both Susan and Pat to see whether they're available on the 25th.
Can
Or maybe I should just ask you now, are you available on the 25th? Which is the Tuesday next time.
I am.
Okay, and Susan, you already said yes? Terrific. And I'll just touch base with both of you to, actually, it's a very informal situation. All we do is sort of, it's an open meeting, and we'll just kind of ask you for why it is you would like to serve the village and that sort of thing, and take it from there.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yes, Pat.
So Pat Gillespie and Susan Ainsley are interested in joining the planning board? Or
Yes.
either boards or what?
The planning board, we have we need an alternate member.
Okay.
We haven't had an alternate member for some time.
Okay, alternate to the planning board. All right, so just want to pass it on to the trustees to make it clear.
Yes, and so the process is that we do that, and then we cannot vote to appoint them. We make a recommendation to the trustees. So you'll be hearing more about this, Pat.
Okay, well, welcome aboard. Well,
at that point, then the appointment is made through the trustees.
Lisa, are you going to waive the 7,000 word essay that's required?
Well, I don't know. I hope everybody has time to look their resumes over. No, yeah, I think we will, under the circumstances, given the whole, COVID situation, we'll just let it go by this time. But no, I'm very pleased that you both expressed interest. Other than that, I think it's not Monica that was covering the trustees, right? So Jim, do you have a trustee or is there anything other news that, before I move on, Mike Scott, that you have for us?
No, ma'am.
Nothing? Okay. Trustee report.
Okay, well, if I missed anything important, we have both Pat and the mayor here and Randy Smith. So anyway, the meeting began with the discussion of the county hazard mitigation plan. The village might audit trees that might present a danger of falling over or present fire hazards. Apparently FEMA requires all New York counties to have such a plan in place. Funds can be requested. They're going to check with Mike about also the village and possible village enforcement action against property owners who have downed trees. And it was passed, trustees vote to accept it with, I guess the villages has an annex to it, which I think John Courtney talked about that. Discussion about a project to improve stormwater drainage around Vitipka and St. Joe. John Courtney was involved in that discussion. And then a discussion regarding the status of an easement involving the Pizza Hut property. Apparently Elmira Savings Bank is interested in buying the property and converting it to a bank. Apparently they would use the existing building and restructure it. There was this discussion about an easement, which I really actually didn't completely follow. The trustees do want this sale to go through. And then finally, there was a discussion regarding sidewalks in Cayuga Heights Road.
Oh, wow. So the Pizza Hut for an easement. Oh, which reminds me, when I don't know when I noticed it, but the easement must have been resolved for Graham Road North because it's now beautiful and was paved. I don't know when that happened exactly, or when I noticed it, but it's great. Terrific down until you get down to the part that belongs back to the mall again, but at any rate. Okay, is there anything else that somebody would like to bring up? And
Hey,
if
Mike
not,
Scott.
pardon me?
But I have a question for Mike Scott. Can you stick around for like 1 minute after the meeting, after everyone else leaves? I have a question for you, non-planning board related.
Okay, and so, and also, is there somebody, I should ask, I guess, who would like to be involved with being a meeting at some point with the beers at all? Just let me know, would you?
I'll do it.
Okay, good, great. We might have to tag team a little bit. We'll see how this goes in terms of that, but I think that would be, okay, great. Okay, in that case, I'm looking for a move to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Mike
I'll second.
Baker, Jim McCauley at 9:05. All those in favor, whoops, say aye.
All right,
Aye.
It's still 9:05. It passed.
stay healthy, everybody. Be careful.
Yeah, yeah.
Be really careful.